It is 1 o'clock, so I guess we're gonna get started again. Yesterday. So for those of you that weren't here, I'm gonna introduce a few people. My name is Tony Cornman. I am the Code Compliance Director. Code Compliance, and with them since March. So, I'm
Right there, right there. There you go.
I got in trouble for not talking into the microphone. I'm going to do my best to talk into the microphone. So again, my name is Tony Cornman. I'm the Director of Code Compliance. We also have in attendance today Lieutenant Pendleton with the Sheriff's Office. If you have any questions she can answer. We have Mike Lynch with us again. He is the manager of Street Side Code. So Mike manages the operation of the Street Side Code division. We also have Clifton Hollington. He is our supervisor one of the supervisors for the beach code operation. So he's out there on the beach every day with the guys. He's a supervisor. We have Melanie Walters, who is our administrative assistant. Again, she keeps all of us straight. Danny Garner is he's Mike's counterpart. He is a manager for the beach side, so he runs the day-to-day stuff on the beach side. And then we have, everybody knows Mr. J. Tusa. He's the big wig down there at TDC. He controls everything. And then we want to thank the clerk for taking our minutes so that we know what we said when we get through before we do an interview, right? All right, so that's the people that's here. We also have Lori with the Beach Ambassadors we mentioned yesterday. We have Trish with the Managed Vendor Program. We got a couple vendors out there. We got some citizens. So hopefully we will be able to answer some questions. Just remember, just because someone's got a different opinion, I don't make them a bad person, all right? So everybody can have different opinions. Today what we're going to do, just like we did yesterday, we're going to open the floor up to topics from you, and then we're going to discuss those topics. Anybody wants to talk about it? When we get through with that topic, we'll move on to another topic. Mike is going to write those topics down up here, so we stay on track. So once we get through discussing, and we have about 6 or 8 on Zoom, so they will also be able to give any comments. And then once we get through, we'll move on to another topic. I have a few that I'm going to probably bring up today, see if we can get some conversation started. If we don't get enough, and then we'll go from there. When we get through with this, we will be putting a report together of what everybody talked about. So if there's something you want in that report, something you want talked about, you need to get it out here today, all right? And then we'll get it in that report, and that's what the commissioners, I will send to the commissioners for any of y'all's recommendations or whatever you'd like to see. So, so we're going to start off with asking, does anybody have any topics they want to talk about? Miss Lisa. What we're going to ask you to do is come up to the podium, speak your name into the microphone, spell your last name, and then please try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less so that we don't take up the whole day with it.
Hey, Lisa Bouchy, B-O-U-S-H-Y. She already knows. See? Okay.
Just a little bit.
Okay. Listen, I first want to make sort of a few general statements. For one thing, the Beach Activities Ordinance is an essential guide now for keeping peace on the beach. With an increasing number of regular residents that we have now, beach vending services that we have in abundance now, and of course our excess of 4 million visitors. So balancing these groups is key to keeping peace on the beach, and it's a chore, it's a job, a big job. The private property customary use issue, to me, is a direct result of this very situation of having more residents and more visitors and trying to balance things. And we don't have a growing beach. Instead, we have a finite beach, and we have a lot more people to put on it. We're fortunate also to have a very diverse ecological environment here that includes not only our pristine white sand beaches, but our protected forest and parklands with flora and fauna or sea turtles, etc. All of those deserve to be given every protection that we can give them while still providing the tourism too. So with those things in mind, I have some suggestions, and I hope that they'll be given some serious consideration. First and foremost is the crowding issue with public beaches. And we've talked about this over the years, but it kind of ebbs and wanes and all that. But I would really like to see the BCC consider this time getting rid of tents and canopies. They have very much the same issues as having vendor chairs and umbrellas that are put out ahead of time and nobody's in them. A lot of people use tents and canopies that way. They'll come out, set them up 7 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and they come and go all day, put chairs outside of them. Half the time people aren't even under them, but they use them as a placeholder to get the prime spots on the beach early in the day. And typically that's citizens and visitors, not our vendors. So, that would be a big step toward helping reduce some of the crowding on the public beaches, and frankly, might make some beachfront owners more amenable to people being on their beaches because they don't have to deal with tents and canopies. The other thing that is an argument for doing that, aside from the fact that many popular beaches throughout the U.S. have gone to no tent canopy rules, is that customary use is in the courts right now. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if it's going to go to the beach owners. We don't know if it's going to go, to customary use. But if it goes to customary use, wouldn't it be better to have, no tents and canopies anywhere on the beach instead of having, the public beaches, you can use them and the private you can't. And, in addition to just those kinds of arguments, the tent canopy issue also is not straightforward. Even if you say 10 by 10, that doesn't mean people aren't putting out a 14 by 14. Then some of the tents also have these ropes and stakes that extend the footprint even larger. And that creates more of a nightmare, frankly, than just saying, well, there's a tent, there's a canopy, these need to come down and use umbrellas, folks, because customary use will require a 7-foot diameter or less umbrella, or multiple umbrellas even. But they're a lot easier if umbrellas break, turn inside out from wind, et cetera. They're a lot easier to get those out of there for those of us who volunteer to clean up our beaches, along with those of you that are paid to do it. And tents are a bear for people to get off the beach when they get broken and torn up. They take up a lot of room too. So those are my main arguments about tents and canopies. My second thing that I realize this is hard. We can never 100% enforce anything. But the holes and trenches and things that people love to dig on the beach that are just enormous, there's just no need for that. And without something in the ordinance to preclude that, we can't enforce it at all. Now, I know that you're not going to be able to go up and down the beach and enforce every hole that gets dug. You don't have the staff to do that. But you can at least have an ordinance that says, folks, you can't dig any bigger hole than, 18 inches and 2 feet square or whatever. And the trenching issue, nobody needs to be building trenches any bigger than just little ones that kids like to do a moat or something like that. But, they're a health and safety issue on the big holes too. Even if people theoretically fill them in, it quite often ends up that it's very soft sand, and as soon as somebody steps on it, their foot goes down a foot when they're expecting it to just flex like the normal sand does. Okay, so that's it, nothing more on that one. In terms of some things that could be done, I would like to see us encourage guests to take their trash to the street and for the trash to be picked up from the street. I know that's not possible everywhere, but it has worked at several locations. And that way, if the trash does get overloaded, at least it's overloaded on the street side where it's a whole lot easier to clean up than it is on the beaches, and is less likely, frankly, to get blown all over the place too. I'd like to see us use as small vehicles as possible on the beach, and this may not be part of the beach activities ordinance, it's just a general thing to help protect our beaches, try to keep Obviously, we don't want to be running over people and we don't want to be getting stuck in the sand, but try to keep the tracks and things as far from the toes of the dunes as we possibly can so that we're practicing good environmental best practices for driving on the beach. I'd like to see you consider putting public beach signs on the boundaries of the public beaches. I think it would reduce some of the signage that we see on the beach today that most all of us, including beachfront owners, prefer not to have. But without any way for people to tell where a public beach starts and ends, then, you know, that leaves it to the private beach owners to put up whatever signs they think are necessary to let people know that. So that might be something you want to even look at coordinating with a group of people or something. I think somebody may have mentioned yesterday about having some sort of scan codes or something at the walkovers. Did I catch that from yesterday?
Yeah.
Where you could hold your phone up, and there's two things that would be really nice. One would be to have the beach activities ordinance, where they could do that and then they'd be able to get the whole schmear, which includes everything. And of course, the beach rules, you know, alone, that part would be very helpful. I want to commend the vendors for their idea about the beach bags. I think that's a phenomenal idea. I hope that, you know, whatever little kinks there might be with that could be ironed out, because the boxes falling apart and turning into battering rams did immeasurable harm in some places, particularly around the outfalls where, you know, all the debris likes to go to start with. So let's see, I think that's, and I think the QRC idea was also included to help with people knowing how to report any sort of violations. And last but not least, with these ideas is I will do anything and everything I can to help you all get more staffing. It's not that your guys aren't good, it's that you need a lot more of them. You can't cover 26 miles of beach with 2 people on the beach at a time. It's just not possible. So let me know how I can help with those things. Jay knows I would help with, I mean, you name it, I'm willing to pitch in. I practice what I preach. I'm not going to suggest something that I would turn around, you know, say, let's try to prevent this, and then I turn around and do it. That's just not my style. So thank you for your time. I always appreciate you all including us in your discussions.
Ma'am, thank you. Okay, so we've got several topics there we got thrown out there, so we need to, she discussed crowding. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. There is some issues. I get a lot of emails about crowding, so that is an issue. The holes and trenches, I agree. I've been down there on the beach and driving along, and during the day it's not as, I'm sorry, I got to stay close. During the day it's not so bad because you can see, but I've run up on some holes down there on the beach during the day that if an officer run up on it at night, their truck would probably disappear. So it is an issue, and we need to come up with something that would help stop that, because some of them get big. I mean, it's like that's all they done on the beach all day was dig. So I agree. The trash is an issue. Smaller vehicles, just so you know, we started buying smaller vehicles, smaller trucks. We have a couple now in operation down there. That's the mid-sized trucks, not the large trucks. But we're also in the process of purchasing a couple side-by-side vehicles that will be down there. So that should take care of some of that footprint problem, hopefully. Let's see, what else? I got to put my glasses on. The public beach signage, I can understand what you're saying there, and the scan code we talked about yesterday, and positions. We would love to have more positions. You can help me get those positions for sure, and we'll get together and come up with how we can do that. But yeah, we would love to have more positions. Everybody would love to have more positions. So I agree with it. So let's go back and has anybody got anything to say? Mr. Jeffries? And again, come up here to the microphone, get your name and
My name is Rich Jaffe. I'm here representing the board of the Historic Inlet Beach Neighborhood.
I think, there we go. Try it again.
How about now? There it is. JAFFE. In regards to the crowding issue, your ordinance says beach vendors' operations are limited to no more than 50% of the beach's frontage at any public beach access. On a regular basis, at our little Wall Street access, I have people coming up to me on the street saying, "Where can we go to set up?" It's first thing in the morning. The problem with that is that when they walk down to the end of Wall Street and they look at the public area of the beach, as of 7:30 in the morning, it's blue tents and chairs. That is a beach crowding issue. I'm a big fan of the managed vendor program. When it was initially pitched to all of us, it was supposed to be expanded to all of the access points after the initial trial period at the 4 primaries. That hasn't happened. If we could control the number of chairs not being used at these various access points, AKA the way that the beach vendor program does it, which is you show up and then they put the chairs down, then the visiting public would know that it's okay, there's some space there. It's not a sea of blue right where they would like to set up. Most visitors, when they come to our beaches and they see solid blue all the way across, they don't realize that they too could be sitting there. And in fact, once the chairs are up, nobody's going to go down and move them. So when it comes to a crowding issue, I think we need to control, again, what happens at the neighborhood access points, as we were supposed to do at the inception of the managed vendor program. And I think that would help a lot. It's not a beach crowding thing, but also I noticed that according to this ordinance, each vendor is supposed to have a trash receptacle on site. Did that translate to the county receptacles, or are they supposed to provide their
They're
own
supposed to
receptacles down?
provide their own and take it off the beach.
I have never seen one. That's why, as Lisa
Well, and it
mentioned.
could be a bag. They could have a garbage bag down there
Okay,
where they're
but I've never seen it.
putting it in there and taking it off.
And I think that speaks to why those county bags and receptacles have been so inundated over the season. And quite frankly, it shouldn't fall on the county guys to haul off the trash that's being left by folks that are paying money and getting paid to do it. So I'd like to know, we have a representative of the Vendor Association, if indeed there's something going on with the managed vendor program, if we can expect it to be expanded or changed or modified a little bit so that it would help with that crowding issue. All for that one.
All right.
And Richard, if I could respond to your comments about the managed vendor program. So this was the year that we were going to look at expanding it to neighborhood beach accesses. And so I encourage you, as we move forward in this process, to come forward and make your concerns known. So when this comes before the Board of County Commissioners, come forward and discuss that, because I think that is important. And we have seen success on the regional beach accesses. And so I think that we can carry that forward onto the neighborhood beach accesses as well.
Poundstone?
Philip Poundstone, Poundstone. I appreciate Mr. Jaffe's comments, specifically about Wall Street. And as one of the individuals in charge of running the managed vendor program, I think Wall Street would be a great addition to that program. The main issue that we can't expand to just neighborhood accesses across the board, a lot of times is parking and a lot of times is restrooms. But that area has enough businesses that we know personally and can work with to work some of that stuff out. In regards to Wall Street specifically,
Just to Philip's point, we need to look at all these accesses, because some may lend themselves to not having a vendor zone or a managed vendor program there. So I think we need to examine each and every access and look at it, and then the board needs to make their decision how they're going to tackle that.
Yeah, so I think there'll be a lot of input on that during this process. People have different opinions, some pro-managed vendor program, some against it, so we'll see how that turns out. So anybody got anything to say about the holes, trenches? Any ordinance you'd like to see? We do have a couple on, thanks for reminding me. Miss Braswell. Miss Braswell, can you hear me? You got to unmute the phone if you're going to talk. Okay, Miss Braswell, go ahead. Okay, Mr. Lane.
Allowing vendors to participate in funding of beach renourishment and restoration, like the trenches that were mentioned, and those funds could be applied to that. And a lot of the beach areas, 2 feet out where you go to the mean high water line versus like an erosion control line, the land that's, from what I understand, the land that is past the erosion control line up to the mean high water line, unless federal funds are applied, is owned by the property owners. That pass the mean high water line, that's owned by, basically that's public. But in certain areas, if just 2 feet of sand were past the mean high water line, that would increase the size of the beach, whereas right now you only have the 6 miles, whereas if over time, a lot of these vendors participated in funding of beach renourishment, that beach area could be built out and used more for tourism.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lane. Miss Braswell, were you able to, you still want to talk? All right, we'll move on. Okay, so we talked about the public beach signage. Anybody got any comments on that? Anybody like to see that? Yes, ma'am.
Lori Peters, Peters. I'm a new vendor this year, and as such, I've had to learn a lot of the codes, and I've asked a lot of questions. I've got busted a few times because I wasn't doing things properly, but I've always been willing to learn and to do things properly. To the issue on tent usage, I was an oncology nurse for many years, and there are medical reasons for clients to need tents, but I don't understand why the public can go anywhere with their tents, but yet our clients have to be the back third of any area if they're through a vendor. And I may be wrong, but that is my understanding. That's what
The tents are the upper 1/3, correct, Cliff?
Tents can only be on the back third of the
Back third,
beach.
exactly.
Except at Grayton.
Okay,
Grayton Beach, there's an exception due to the vehicles. Vehicles can be that close. The tents can be right there with the vehicles. But everywhere else on the beach,
even public.
county beaches, the public and vendors, if they have a tent, has to be on the upper third of the beach.
Okay,
But you still have to be on the upper third and leave the 15-foot corridor
Right.
for emergency vehicles.
absolutely. Okay. And with the crowding, the vendor zones, because we participated in the managed accesses. And for me, that has been a great thing. Yes, there are some things that can be done to make it better, and I've made suggestions for that. But even just today, at a managed access, I had a client call and stated that when they arrived, there wasn't a vendor, the attendant there, and the public had taken all of the vendor zone. So when no one is there. I mean, there's just no signage. There's no way for the public to know. I was standing at Dune Allen myself one day, and a gentleman came over and stood there and was kind of scoping out everything. And then he went back to his truck and got his tents and his chairs and went and walked straight to the vendor zone and, put his equipment up. And then that, cuts down because we're restricted as to where we can set up. That cuts down on that. And then when our clients come up and there's nowhere for them to go, I mean, I've had to refund thousands of dollars this year alone to clients that could not be comfortably set up in a vendor zone, even after explaining how the managed access programs work to them. So that is, from my standpoint, a frustration that if, we're going to have a vendor zone, then it needs to be for vendors. And if we're not, then we need to be able to set up everywhere on the county property and just let everyone do it nicely. I mean, I don't know if that's not a possibility, but, I just try to do things the way it should be done. And when we were talking yesterday about the private beach owners, I don't understand how private beach owners can leave their equipment and their beach toys and everything, chairs and baskets and stuff down on the sand when we're told that none of our equipment can stay on the sand overnight. So can you explain the difference to
Some of
that?
it could be private property, and they file for a beach item permit. They have to file for a permit if they're leaving something on the beach, and that has to get approved. If it requires a DEP permit, then they would have to get a DEP permit. So we have a permitting process for that, and again, it's called beach item permit. So they have to do that before they can leave it down there.
Okay. Because even this morning when we were setting up, there's just stuff.
Yeah.
It's all down there. And of course, when the hurricanes come through, where does that stuff go? It goes down to the waterways, wherever it drains,
yeah.
and then there's just more debris and things on the beach.
Absolutely. I think it's safe to say that everybody probably should have picked up a little more before the storm came last time. So,
Well, anything, we can do,
yeah.
we'll be happy to. I have mandated for our company that we pick up our equipment each and every day. We don't leave anything down there. If we have a private client, it's bound to their personal walkway so that it doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
So we're trying, and
Yeah.
if we can do anything else, we'll be happy to do that because we want the beach to be nice. We want to continue with tourism. I mean, obviously, we're trying to make a living at it.
Sure.
So,
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Thank you for your comments.
Tony, if I could, just to clarify, for the managed vendor programs at the regional beach accesses, there are no vendor zones. Those went away last year when we implemented the program. There's a sharing of the public beach between beach vendor and the public. And so you set your set out wherever you can, and then when your customer leaves, you pick your set up. I think you might be thinking of the old way where there was the vendor zone. There are no more vendor zones for the managed vendor program.
There-
At a neighbor, well, that's different. She's
Yeah.
talking about regionals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
public beach, yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify.
Grayton's the only one with a vendor zone,
Correct.
for the managed vendor program. Grayton does have a vendor zone that the managed vendors program has to be in.
And that was at the request of the neighbors in Grayton Beach.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Managed vendor program and all, it shows you that in there. All right, you got to come up here to the microphone. They got to get it.
There was talk over the last few years, at the very least, Rich Jaffe, Historic Inlet Beach Neighborhood Association, about an enforcement issue whereby we would really put some teeth in to the concept of enforcement. It was a 3 strikes and you're out policy. It's been brought up in front of the commissioners many times to try and deal with the most egregious of the beach vendors. And I'm curious where we stand on that. I mean, it's never happened. Is it a possibility? Because quite frankly, and you know it as well as I do, for many of the vendors, the violations are the cost of doing business. And it is far easier to simply pay a fine for a couple $100 and keep doing what you're doing than it is to modify your behavior and try and avoid that in the first place. And when you are talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of business getting slapped on the wrist now and then, doesn't really mean much. So my question, I guess for all of you, is can we bring about something to really give you some muscle to clamp down on the worst of the offenders? And how can we do that?
I'll be glad to discuss that with you. We've actually been developing some of you probably know, the beach ordinance, activities ordinance actually says in there that you can suspend a vendor's permit. But what it doesn't do, it doesn't go into detail, doesn't give us a way of doing that. Everybody has to have due process, so we have to have a process in place. So we've been working on a permit suspension process and revocation process that, and it's going to be broken down into to categories on different violations, types of violations, how many occurrences would occur before you get your permit suspended. And of course, if we determine that we need to suspend one, there will be a process in place where you can take your mitigation before a board or whatever and let them hear it. So we are working on that. And you're exactly right. We hear it all the time when sometimes the vendors pay their fines, they'll say, just the cost of doing business. That's not a good thing to say. That means the fines are not heavy enough, for sure. We have vendors, and I'm sorry, I'm not picking on vendors, I'm just giving information. We have vendors that sometimes wait till the end of the year and they'll pay all their tickets for the whole year, when in reality they have 10 days to either pay their fine or request a hearing with the clerk's office. And sometimes they don't do that. They just wait till the end of the season, pay it before they get their next permit. So that's got to stop. They should be doing it just like everybody else within those 10 days. So we are working on a few things to do with that. It hasn't, we hadn't completed that yet. We've got a draft, and I'm sure that in the next few months, the commissioners will be discussing some of that. Yes, sir. How did I know you was coming?
STO&E. I would highly encourage you as a code department and county commission and TDC to not do that for the one simple reason. Let's use an easy example, okay? Let's say we have one Chick-fil-A in this town and we have 70 Taco Bells in this town, okay? Chick-fil-A is going to have very few issues compared to the 70 Taco Bells because of their size. My company often gets used as an example because we do get some citations. If anybody in their right mind thinks that I'm okay going to bed at night getting a $500 ticket and I think it's okay and it's just a cost of doing business, it's a write-off, that is the craziest comment I've ever heard, because that hurts very, very badly. It stings very, very badly. If a young man that lives in Freeport or Defuniak or Santa Rosa Beach didn't put their chair 10 feet over the line, or they had on their list to pick up a chair and they didn't, it got left out, and I get a $500 ticket, I don't write it off as that's no big deal. The problem is my company in Walton County is the 70 Taco Bells, okay? If you add it up, I get more tickets than a small vendor, and I do not think that it's very fair if you were to call our multiple partners or you to talk to commissioners or any of you here. I think most of you would agree that we absolutely positively try to do our business in the right way. And it is a matter of absolute human error, just like what's your favorite restaurant? It might be Red Bar that everybody thinks is so iconic. Has anyone ever had an issue at Red Bar where you waited too long or the food came out a little cold or whatever the case may be? Absolutely. And I don't disagree with the fact that there are fines when something goes wrong on public property. I don't. And I think that it should, and it does help try to get our act together, especially when we pass some of that on to an employee. But for my business, that this past year we had 165 employees, most of which are Walton County residents, to say, hey, your business is probably going to tank now because just as a matter of statistics, you got more tickets than anyone else. I don't think that's a fair process, but I am completely open to working with the commission and you and anyone else to absolutely work on ways to not have errors. But at the end of the day, we are all human beings. We all have errors, and I am going to be the first person in line to try to make it where we don't have errors and work with you all. Thank you.
Well, and maybe you misunderstood me. I'm not saying, I'm not saying if you have a location where you have a vending permit and you have a number of violations there and we suspend that permit, that your whole permit's suspended for the whole beach. That's not what I said. But for instance, in your case, you have several permits because you have several locations. If you have one location that is consistently causing the same problem, then we may need to do something different with it. You know, and I hear a lot, you know, we've got these young kids that's working for us. Well, that's who you're hiring. So you got to make sure they know what the laws are, what the rules are, and they got to comply with those rules. So, but anyway, we're willing to work with you, but we have to come up with something. I hear it, if not daily, weekly, about some of this stuff. Most of you know I used to work for the state. I thought I got a lot of emails with the state. I didn't get a lot of emails with the state. I get a lot of emails with the county, a lot. So, and we try to sort through them. And again, a lot of it is own vendors. A lot of it is, for instance, we've been getting a lot of emails of people that actually wants the vendor times that they set up to be controlled. They don't want the vendor setting up till 9 or 10 o'clock when the lifeguard's set up. So there's a lot of different options that are coming in online as well as publicly here. So there's a lot of things that the commissioners are going to have to consider. Your point of view is going to be one of those. Our point of view is going to be one. The citizen point of view is going to be one, and they're going to have to make the best decision they can with the information they got. It's not, and please understand, I think I said it yesterday, I am not making the decision. All I make is recommendations. I am not making the decision. I don't create the ordinance. I don't create the fine fees. We make recommendations, and the commissioners are going to do that. And that they have a big job to do. So they're the ones that's going to have to do that. All right? They're the ones that chose to run for office, didn't they? All right. So anybody else got anything to say about that? So we got that out there. So anybody else? Nobody else? All right. Let's see what else we got here. Talked about that. All right. Has anybody else got a topic we want to talk about? No topics. Nobody. Anybody on? We got Mr. Lane. Can you hear me, Mr. Lane?
Yes. I think as far as, you know, majority of the problems are definitely just related to over congestion, and having that 6-mile area, it just seems that beach renourishment would definitely, as far as the critically eroded areas, that would open everything up a lot to where it's not so congested. So just mainly creating renourishment zones and a way of funding those. And that's one thing that could be talked about.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Let me, since nobody else is got any topics they want to do, I'm going to look through some of my emails here and see if I can throw some out that we can get some talk going. So, okay. Deborah Yurko.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I had a question. I don't know if you talked about it yesterday. I was part of the call-ins that couldn't get through on the Zoom. But I know there was an issue that you all were considering possibly not allowing owners of property to actually set up beach boxes to store their umbrellas and chairs. When we set up a number of chairs, like 12 of them. So we would be in the same category or problem as a beach vendor. And I think you are recommending, if I'm not mistaken, to allow beach vendors to still have boxes on the beach. And I'm hoping that you will include owners in that if it goes to a certain number of chairs, to at least justify or at least treat the owners equivalent with beach vendors.
Okay, so we hear what you're saying. We understand that. The boxes, what we may recommend for next year, we haven't decided totally yet, but what we may recommend is something like one of our vendors is using, and I have an example up here if anybody wants to look at it, and it's just a vinyl plastic covering that just sits down over the chairs. From what I understand from the people that's had it made, it's cheaper than a box. It's easier to be removed from the beach from a box. And as far as the private citizens go with boxes, vendor boxes are defined in the ordinance for permitted vendors. It doesn't say anything in the ordinance about a private citizen having a box. It talks about a private citizen having a permitted item. You can get an item permitted, which could be I don't know. It talks about things that are not easily removed off the beach. So if you got a kayak or something that may not be easily removed off the beach, you might could get a item permit, or I think there's a boat down there and a few things like that. But there's nothing in the ordinance that says a private citizen can have a box. So that's where that came from.
Right, I guess, but what I'm trying to understand though is if the purpose is because it's not easily removed and we're allowing vendors who don't own the property to store items on the beach, I don't quite understand why owners could not do the same on their own property. And I understand what you're saying, like you don't want them just to store a bunch of junk on the beach in a box, but it seems like we could maybe split that baby and set some standards for what could be in a box stored down the beach by an owner, like if it is something that is not easily taken off the beach. Because if you've got vendors that are, let's say, storing 12 beach chairs and 6 umbrellas in a box, and you have an owner storing 12 beach chairs and 6 umbrellas in a box, it doesn't seem fair that the owner who's paying the taxes on that property cannot store that there, but a vendor can.
Okay, yeah, and I understand what you're saying, and that may be a possibility that gets included for, it's just not in the ordinance now. So it may be something that is included in the future. So that will be something that we'll have to discuss and see if the commissioners want to add that.
So I'm a little confused because as of 2020, you could have a box on the beach to store something large like that or voluminous like that. But it sounds like you're saying that's already changed.
No, the ordinance, whenever I got here in March and we reviewed the ordinance doesn't, only people it talks about having a box is a permitted vendor. It's the only person it talks about in the ordinance being able to have a box on the beach. The other ones are permitted items. They have to file for a permit for an item, not a box, but an item that they want to leave on the beach overnight.
So how would an owner go about doing that then?
We have the application's online, isn't it, Melanie? Yeah, so contact Melanie Walters at our office.
I
It's-
actually have in the past, and I was directed to get a beach box permit in the past. I was never told to get a beach item permit.
Okay. Well, and like I said, I can't speak on the past. All I can speak about is whenever I come on it in March. And whenever I started reviewing the ordinance, it doesn't talk anything about, private individuals having boxes.
And I actually did get the permit in May. So I'm glad you're on board, but that was actually after you were on board.
Right. Okay, well, we'll look at that and see. But again, if, any applications in the future for a private box would be, there's nothing in the ordinance that allows us to do that.
So there's nothing in the ordinance, and I guess there's nothing that's preventing us either.
Well, there's an ordinance that says the person that can have one is a permitted vendor. If you're a permitted vendor, then sure, you can file a application for a box.
But yeah, I understand. It just doesn't seem fair when, as an owner in some communities, you're not allowed to have a vendor on your beach. And therefore, so you've got the HOA saying you can't have a vendor on your beach, and then the county is saying only vendors can keep things on the beach. So we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard spot, but still being legally liable and paying for our real estate. So that's what I'm trying to get at. There are actually some exceptions that are slipping through the cracks here that seem like they could be fixed easily rather than necessitating much more extreme measures that would be not really cost beneficial for the county or the owners.
Yeah, and like I said, we understand that, and we will work with you to make accommodations for you to be able to keep your stuff on the beach.
Okay.
Again, contact us at 622-40. Talk to Melanie, and she will help walk you through that process.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
All right. You're going to forward it to us. All right. Let's see. Let me ask this. Is any of the vendors, because I see one, two, is that all we got? Three? Has any vendors got any comments on regulating the time that the vendor can set up? Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. We want to hear your side. This is your time to give your side. Because if all they get's one side.
My name's Robert Morales. Morales is spelled Miralles. I own 38 Shade Beach Service, and I actually operate my company lead from the front. So I personally run right beside the gentlemen that work for me. I run anywhere from 10 to 16 miles a day with an average of 40 pounds on my body. And it's tracked actually on my phone in case anybody wants to see that. Now, part of setting up early in the morning is the temperatures are quite a bit different in July at 7 in the morning compared to 9 in the morning, as well as the humidity index. So for breaking down for the gentleman, the casualty for heat stroke is quite a bit less earlier in the morning than, like I said, at 9 o'clock. As well as catering to demand, you can only move so fast. I can run pretty quick, but, when I've got a young mother with her, 3-month-old or, kids running around and, she's upset because she's having to run after them and then wait on me to get chairs and umbrellas set up on these large communities that, for example, Gulf Place is one of the areas that I cover, and I'll have 180 umbrellas that go up in July, if not more, in that section, and catering to that kind of demand, trying to run back and forth at 9 o'clock in the afternoon because they're already coming down. I'm telling you, it makes it quite difficult at those later hours in the day. Thank you.
He's coming.
Dave Meadows, Meadows, The Times, just brief history. I've been doing as long as Chip has, 35 plus years down here since the early 80s, doing beach service. And back then, we still ran the same number of umbrellas and larger areas and so forth. But before Turtle Watch, beach services started at 5 a.m. And it wasn't it was a combination. Yes, it is to get your client on the front row. It is to get them a spot. They pay top dollar for it. We weren't as crowded back then. And it was also to beat the heat. And so as time has got to where we are now, there's a whole bunch of factors now. You know, we've already been adjusted by Turtle Watch. You know, it used to be at 6 a.m. the guys would get out there and set up. Now it's averaged with Turtle Watch 6 to 6:15, which is great. And it's perfect. And I think the system has worked really well. It applies strictly only to the vendor, because the vendor is the only one that gets regulated. But on the public side, they'll start at 5 a.m. still, because they're doing it not to beat the heat, they're doing it to claim the spot, and that's it. So those folks are already out there, and Turtle Watch will tell you this, they see the public setting up before the vendor on a daily basis. If we move our times for the vendor for 9 o'clock in the morning, the only purpose of those emails and those complaints are not to, you know, all it is allowing them to get to the beach and claim their spot. That's it. There's no other reason for it. They're just not happy wherever they're going to. It's already filled. And trust me, if the vendor is a vendor zone or a managed beach access, if that company, not talking about private, but if that company doesn't show up until 9 a.m., the beach is going to be packed. It'll fill up. It'll fill up with the tents. It'll fill up with the Walmart umbrellas or whatever down there. And then when the vendor comes, they're going to have the public, which comes to the condos and rents our chairs and pays for that service. So you have public in both aspects of this wanting to get to the beach early in the morning. Our hours are 9 to 5, but we start setting up at 6 a.m. based on the work level. So I just feel if we start pushing back the time on the vendor, listen, I'm for it, but as long as you're enforcing it on the rest of the public, not just the public we cater to, but to the rest of the public, which consists of owners and locals and other people that don't rent the services. So to me, that's the only way that would work, but you can't penalize half the public and then reward the rest of the public. So, thank you.
Dave, I have a question for you, if you don't mind. You mentioned that your customers pay top dollar to be on the front row. What do they pay? And is it more than
No,
if they're
it's-
not on the front row?
No, and eventually as time goes on, those systems will change, because if you go in different areas of the state of Florida or throughout the world, people pay more to be on a front row if that's the case. But we already know, we don't participate in the manager, we don't rent on public property anymore. We're done with that, just because we charge $45 a day for 2 chairs and an umbrella, or discounted for the week. So when we were on those public beaches, we couldn't get out there or set up, or it was the vendor program, they show up a certain time, they find themselves, or even in a vendor zone. My guy's not going to go to that public beach at 6 a.m. and set it up, because it just doesn't work that way. They find themselves on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th row, too many complaints, so we just got out of the public vending area. So now we strictly just take care of private property. And in most cases, front row all of our prices are the same, and most of our properties allow for just 1 row of chairs. But we do have others that are 6 rows deep, and it's the same price for the front row all the way to the back row. And our customers understand that, but they've been coming to those properties for so many years, they know what they're getting when they get down to the beach. But
I have a couple of other questions. Given that we're obviously serving people that aren't staying in the beachfront house, do you have contracted beach setups with individual rental owners to set up on the private property that you're setting up on?
that are not on the
Part
beach.
of the private property you're setting up on?
In a handful of places, yes, because the private property allows us to rent to the public. They don't treat it as private exclusive just for that HOA. So some of those properties will allow us to rent to folks that are across the street. They'll share it with neighborhoods and so forth. But that's the completely discretion of an HOA. They decide whether that happens or not. And usually it's near a public access to where they can access through the public and then walk down to the location. But if it's a private property in the middle of private property for miles, that doesn't exist.
Okay.
Did I answer that?
Well, we certainly want to maximize the availability of the beach for, the public, and only a limited number of folks have beachfront property, and
That is-
everybody else has to
I
make
do a
some kind
property
of
at Ed
arrangement.
Wallene, Sunrise Beach. Love it. They allowed us to rent to the public, but that's changed. They're no longer allowing to the public. They want it private. And I'm weighing, because I hate that spot. I mean, our guys get destroyed every day from the public and destroyed by the renters that want it to be private. So it's just, mentality, the mindset for our guys over the day, they're beach guys. They're supposed to have fun on the beach, relax, get a suntan, get a girlfriend, whatever. But to get cursed at all day long because of a private property issue or a public issue just isn't worth it anymore. So, we might not service that contract anymore. It's a decision that we have to make. And then there'll be another vendor that's going to jump right in and do it. So,
Well,
but I'm trying to always convince these owners and properties, it's best to serve the public, especially if you're next to a public access. Don't make it private. Just makes it, it's a no-win situation for anybody.
Well, I ask these questions in the context of a number of members of the public that have asked us to regulate beach vending as an allowable activity within the zoning ordinance, or not allow beach vending if the zoning ordinance doesn't allow it. So that is a question that the board is going to be asked to consider, and we're just trying to collect as much information and understand the business itself and how the public uses the business, so that we can make a recommendation on whether or not beach vending services should be something that requires a development order under the Land Development Code and the zoning ordinance, or if it should not, and continue to be regulated separate from the Land Development Code and the zoning code, as is the present circumstance, as directed by the board.
I think that you guys are really, we live in a unique area to where you have such 26 miles of beach, and only 6 of it belong to the public, and then the rest is either state or privately owned. That's not the case in majority of the rest of the coast of Florida. And social media is one of the worst things I think has ever happened, but the amount of pictures that come and the complaints that come from our local area on these pages automatically take a picture of private property, and they show it as it's public property. And I've always wondered why our ordinance, maybe I'm wrong on this, but respectfully, I think that needs to be an ordinance that adheres to private property, working with HOAs on their rules and regulations, which is sometimes stricter than the counties. And then the county also needs to have, if they want to regulate beach services on private property, yes, have an ordinance separate. And then for public land, you need to have an ordinance for that, to where all your rules go down and that's the law of the land. But most of the time, an HOA, you'll find yourself in a lawsuit, and it's the more we put more rules on that HOA, the more they're going to fight back, and the more they're going to keep putting lawsuits on it. And eventually, they're going to say, "Well, we'll get rid of the beach vendor, and we'll do it ourselves." That. Well, all that is we hire you, now you're an employee of this HOA, and they'll find all the loopholes around it and so forth. But it creates such a problem back and forth. But I really think going forward, when we do the ordinances, that there needs to be 2 separate ordinances. And I don't know if that's possible or not, but I just know that at some point in time, owners of HOAs are going to get fed up and just start suing. And I don't know if they have the basis for it or the grounds for it, but I don't want to see it, and I don't want to be in the middle of all that. But I'm willing to work with you guys in anything, anytime you need anything, answers, questions, whatever. I'm here.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Couple points of clarifications. Rich Jaffe, JAFFE. Mr. Meadows was just talking about having his guys set up 6 o'clock or 6:15. The ordinance says that during the sea turtle nesting season, vendors shall be allowed to the beach between 7:30 a.m. or after the morning sea turtle survey has been completed. What's the difference?
Yeah. Well, and what happens when the sea turtle people get through?
Yeah.
They're clearing it. They notify the vendors by text and let them know it's clear they can set up.
Well, as you know, that's one of the complaints, that the vendors are setting up
Yeah.
so very early, where in black and white it says 7:30, or when that nesting survey has been complete.
Yeah.
And also, I think the issue that you brought up, Mac, speaks again to the fact that what is in play here is a request from various neighborhoods, including Inlet Beach, to have more enforcement on the land zoning issue, the residential zoning, so that we don't have two different sets of regulations for beachfront property owners and the rest of the community. And I think that's the significant part of this whole thing. The beachfront owners shouldn't be allowed to do business in a residential area, which has been the argument that we've been making for quite a while, when it's purely zoned residential. If it's residential, it's residential. If it's commercial, it's commercial. But you should not be looking to have two different sets of regulations, one for beachfront folks and one for the rest of the communities.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
While you're up there. So, and just clear my mind up. So Barbary Coast down there rents chairs down on the beach.
Well, they don't rent chairs on the beach. That's what's been going on at 210 Winston. There's been an ongoing concession to rent chairs on the beach.
So, but you, I guess, provide chairs for people that rent.
Not you, they, I don't live there.
Yeah, but they provide chairs for people that rent those
For their
houses.
guests in the house, yes.
Right. So if we say that dealing with chairs like that is a business, wouldn't that be the same thing? Wouldn't that be, you're getting money for renting that house, which includes the chairs, whether you're actually paying for the chairs when you get down there or not?
If the chairs are coming as an amenity of renting the house, it's very different from you making money setting up for anybody that walks up off the beach and you're running a concession on the beach. That's two different things.
But
I mean-
isn't that exactly what the Point condominium was doing at 210 Winston Lane? They were contracting for a certain number of setups for their guests. What's the difference?
The difference is you have a house in a residential neighborhood that might provide chairs for their guests just, I mean,
Are they not renting the houses at Barbary Coast? Is that a non-rental community?
I guess some of the property owners in Barbary Coast have rentals there, yeah. But what's different, let me ask you, what's different about providing chairs if you're renting my beach house, whether they are vendor chairs or I've got a handful of aluminum chairs in my old storage unit and you carry them down to the beach? If you're providing chairs simply for the people renting the house.
Yes, but the house is not on the same parcel as the chairs. That's the problem.
Plus
Well,
that vendor that's renting those chairs or doing those chairs, he's not doing it for free. And he gets a vendor permit, just like all the other vendors. He's a permitted vendor, correct? Yeah.
But what's likely happening here, and Philip, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is the beach operation at 210 Winston Lane was receiving a fee from the off-site provider of gas.
From the Point, is what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Point's paying him to provide beach setups for their guests. Is that not what's happening at Barbary Coast? Because those parcels are not.
I don't
part
live
of
in
that
Barbary
development.
Coast. I believe that people who might be renting those houses are probably getting the chairs as a perk of renting the house. They're not paying directly for
Right.
chairs.
Which I think is the circumstance at the Point.
The Point is an off-site
Barbary Coast.
private enterprise.
Off-site, private enterprise, HOA. I'm trying to come up with a distinction between the two so we can figure out how to manage the situation.
The distinction is, rather simply, Inlet Beach in particular is zoned residential. If you are running a commercial enterprise in one of those properties that is not addressed in the neighborhood plan, then it shouldn't be legal. If you are telling me that I can't tell somebody that rents my beach house that, oh, by the way, there are chairs underneath, feel free to use them, I don't see that that's particularly any different from somebody at Barbary Coast going, hey, I have a vendor who provides chairs. We'll be happy to make arrangements for you so that you have some chairs there.
Except that the lots where the chairs are set up are not part of the Barbary Coast subdivision. That's the distinction. It's just like the point.
Barbary Coast, to my knowledge,
Does not have
has-
any beachfront property.
That's not true. There are a bunch of people in Barbary Coast that have beachfront property that have been
Not
allowing
part of
people
the-
to use
Oh, I
their
know,
property to set up
but
chairs.
They are not part of what the county approved for that subdivision. It was added on to privately after the fact. Same thing the point did.
No, it's not. It's not the same thing, Mac. If you want to deal with Barbary Coast, then deal with Barbary Coast and the individual property owners there who may or may not have done things appropriately. The bottom line to all of this, and quite frankly, we're wasting too much time for other folks here, is that Inlet Beach is zoned residential. And what has been going on at 210 Winston is a totally commercial enterprise that is inappropriate. And we've had those discussions over and over again. And in fact, I would
Don't
ask you, what
disagree
happened to
with
the code board meeting that was supposed to deal with some of that?
It's, what's the date?
It's still on the docket for the next meeting.
Of this month?
Yes,
Okay.
October 21st. They had to postpone last month. They couldn't get a quorum with the board, so they had to move it. So it's still on the agenda for this month.
And, okay, we'll be happy to attend. By the way, I just got a message that says, the renters at Barbary Coast rent chairs directly from a designated beach vendor. Barbary is not involved in that. The beachfront properties are part of Barbary Coast. And that's from the head of the Barbary Coast HOA.
I understand that now, but that's been done privately, not with county approval.
Then Mac, you're the county approval. Deal with it. Fix it.
And I expect we will.
Okay.
My concern here, though, is trying to understand what our market is doing, because Barbary Coast is not the only circumstance that's like that. I suspect there are a lot of them.
I suspect
But
there are
even
too.
beyond that, one of the issues, and we got to be fair here and treat similar situated circumstances the same. That's what I want to do. But I want
Well-
to make sure they're
Look,
similar circumstances.
you're the
so I can
county.
decide.
You need to deal with it throughout the county. I can tell you in Inlet Beach, that property is zoned residential and it should be dealt with residential. It should not have any additional stipulations or benefits for anybody.
And I-
That's what we have asked all of you who were involved in this for the last 3 years to do,
We're
which is
taking-
enforce the standing regulations and to disallow what is believed to be an illegal use of that property, which is totally commercial. And that's a land code issue.
No, sir, it is not, except for the points use of that parcel. That absolutely is, and that's still scheduled for the code board, and we're going to prosecute that case.
I'm glad you are.
But I'm trying to make a distinction between that case and anything else, because we've got lots of similar circumstances. Let me just throw one out to you.
Well, if you have similar circumstances, I would suspect then that they must all have neighborhood plans, which designates an individual property specifically as residential, because that's what it comes down to.
And I understand that, but that's not limited to just 210 Lane and Inlet Beach.
Well-
There are other circumstances.
Fine. And I welcome you to deal with those. The only thing Inlet Beach is concerned about, quite frankly, is dealing with Inlet Beach.
And I understand that.
Okay.
But Inlet Beach is not the only portion of our county, and we have to craft rules that
Well, we have a neighborhood plan, so
That's
you could,
everybody.
you could enforce the neighborhood plan.
neighborhood plan does not address beach vending.
Well,
And beach vending is
that's-
not, is not subject to the land development code because the
We'll,
board has.
we'll argue
act-
this or discuss it in a different venue sometime. It's already
But here's another
been
circumstance.
discussed.
Here's a circumstance of a beach vendor that has permission to vend on a residential property that may have contracted with a real estate company that manages a collection of single-family homes north of the beach. And so they may have an arrangement to provide beach setups for 30 single-family homes. I'm just throwing out a number. That circumstance exists also. And largely, it's the same as what's happening at Barbary Coast. And I'm not picking on Barbary Coast, and we've taken no action on Barbary Coast at this point.
Barbary Coast is willing to
there are-
observe the same restrictions that we've proposed.
But there are a number, and I
And
appreciate
so am I.
What
If
we're
you want
trying
to deal with
do
Barbary Coast,
is
I'm telling you,
come up
Barbary
with
Coast
a
officially is
circumstance
willing to
that
deal with
works
that. They've
for
said it.
Everyone.
But the only thing anyone's
And
asked
Barbary
is for you to make a determination on that as an improper use of that property. So anyway, you're getting the wrap. I appreciate that. Thank you. I've been trying to walk away.
Thank you. All right, let's take a 5-minute break. Some of us have to, so let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come right back, we'll finish up. All right. We're going to try to up here, but we'll go to 5 if everybody's got something to say. Mr. McIntyre, come on.
I'm Warren McIntyre, that's McIntyre. I worked with the sheriff's office for 23 years. I worked 4 years on the beach. I also worked for one of the beach vending companies for about 4 years after I retired. And I'd like for the commission and all you folks that are involved in this rulemaking to remember, these kids that they hire are Walton County high school kids, and they're gonna make mistakes. So we need to kind of, keep them in line, but we don't need to spank them too hard either. The other thing is, I challenge you, if you think doing what they do is an easy job, go down there to the beach at about 7 o'clock in the morning and walk up down the beach to about 10 o'clock. And when your tongue's hanging out and you're lapping sand, you'll realize just how hard that job is. So changing the times to 9 o'clock, there's a lot of difference in the temperature and the way that person will feel and what kind of job he'll actually do for his customers. And the other thing is, these beach chairs are amenities for folks that come to our beaches. Our beaches are what pays the bills in this county. If we didn't have them, if we didn't have the tourists, we wouldn't have Walton County. We wouldn't have the nice things that we have. This building, all these guys in nice uniforms, doing a good job. Just remember who they are. They're citizens of Walton County too. And we need to take care of the citizens of Walton County. All I have.
Thank you, sir. Okay, what else we got to talk about? Somebody's got to give us something. What about bonfires? Anybody got anything about bonfires? Everybody know what the regulations are on bonfires?
Our department doesn't.
Hey, come on up, Philip. I'm just trying to get y'all to talk about some of the ordinance so we can discuss
Appreciate it.
what we need to change, what we need to keep, get rid of.
This is an extremely rare comment on my side, trying to change something and make it a little better. I would ask that the BCC, if you want to write that down, Mr. Michael, is that they would consider making the 50-foot from the vegetation line that your bonfire pit has to be, moving that to something like 35 or something like that. Mr. Tom Lane, if he's listening, he knows with our beach erosion that this is a very big deal. And we have been getting some tickets when we were very close to that 50-foot line, and we certainly didn't want to, and it's becoming an issue that we would like to see changed. And sure, Mr. Sammy could speak on it too if they felt like 35 feet was enough. I don't recall there ever being an issue with fire and the vegetation line. but I would just ask that be respectfully considered 30, 35 feet. Just anything would make it more helpful for us to show these people a good time. Thank you.
So what he's talking about, for those that you may not know, is the ordinance requires that your fire apparatus, whatever, has got to be 50 foot from any vegetation, the dune line or whatever. So, but it also requires, what, 15 foot from the water?
So you have to be 50 foot with an open flame from any vegetation line in Walton County on the beach. And you also have to leave the 15-foot corridor from the water's edge. This is where we're having a problem. Either they're not 50 foot or they're within the 15 foot.
Well, that's 65 foot overall. So if you got a beach that's only 45 foot wide, you basically can't have a fire there. And we're still having fires there. So, anyway, that's part of what what he's talking about. So, anybody's got any suggestions on that, feel free to come up here. Mr. Jeffrey does.
I would suggest you not change that. And if possible, maybe pursuant to what you were just discussing, specify certain areas of the beach where you simply can't have fires. I'm thinking again of what has become the beach in Inlet Beach, and specifically at Wall Street and at Winston. Those areas have gotten very, very narrow. And during the season, I will tell you that on a regular basis, the folks who live in those houses right along the beach and very close thereby get choked out with smoke on the big weekends. And there have been any number of elderly folks who have raised all kinds of hell with me in trying to find out, is there something we can do? We can't sit out on our porch. Some of them have respiratory conditions. And all it takes is a little bit of wind shift, and you've got a bunch of fires in one given area, and all of a sudden, the homeowners and the property owners have a diminished capacity for enjoying their own properties and maybe even health issues. I would say if you move, thinking about how narrow many portions of Inlet Beach are right now, you move that any closer to the vegetation line, it's even closer to the houses, and you're going to get even more concentrated smoke. I think the only thing realistically that you can look at is to evaluate the width of the beach at any given point, and it may change with the seasons. But perhaps there are areas where they should just be restricted and not allowed to have fires at all. A wider section of the beach, like up at Orange Street, where you got big wide beach and you don't have houses right there, that's fine.
All right, thanks for those comments. Mr. Sanchez is coming up right now to explain the fire. I knew he was coming. He's going to explain
Sammy Sanchez, Fire Marshal, South Walton Fire District. Just for the record, we set those limits on a lot of these beach accesses. We did that years ago because we realized not every access is capable of supporting 2, 3, 4, 5 bonfires. So over the years, we do evaluate each access, and that is something that we planned. We had a meeting with Tony earlier this year, actually last month, to discuss that in January, because we know there has been some erosion. So we will look at all that. Certainly, if we warrant that it doesn't meet our guidelines for having a bonfire, we'll just take it off the list. I mean, it's literally that simple for us. Obviously, we report that to the county, but there's nothing in the statute that says we have to have 2 beach bonfires at this access and 10 at this one. It's just they charged us with overseeing it, and that's, when we look at that, those are the things that we're looking at. We look at it from a safety component and ensuring that it meets those guidelines. And actually, those guidelines come from forestry for outdoor burning, and we just kind of transpose them over to the beach. I don't know that there are guidelines for beach burning anywhere in the state of Florida. So if forestry says 50 foot, then that's what we've gone with, and we'll continue to do so. But we will certainly look at that in the upcoming year. And again, if we need to change it, we don't have a problem changing it at all. We do. Yes, sir. That is correct. And we have done that on many occasions, these vendors can tell you. I don't hesitate to pull the trigger. There's one specific day of the year that we don't issue any permits, and that's on July 4th. And the reason we do that is, quite frankly, it's kind of a war zone down there. No disrespect to any veterans, with fireworks. And we just didn't think it was safe to have fireworks and bonfires going at the same time. And actually, this year, the governor passed a state statute now, and fireworks are legal
3 days a year.
3 days a year, on July 4th, New Year's Eve, and New Year's Day. So if you get people shooting fireworks off the beach, that is beyond our control, believe it or not. The only way to do that would be to shut down the beach, and I don't know that anybody's interested in doing that. So I'll take your phone call, but I'm telling you, there's not a whole lot I can do about it. The governor passed that.
Sammy, can you explain the 15 feet that's in addition to the 50 feet?
You're talking about the emergency access? Yes, sir, that is for our guards so that they can traverse from one end of the beach to the other for water rescues or medical calls or whatever comes up. Yes, sir, so that's a path that we discussed with the TDC and with county to allowing that, because during the summer, if you don't have that and you have a medical condition on the beach or you have a drowning, and David's here, you could probably speak better on this, but it is extremely difficult to get from point A to point B when you're having to jump through hoops and people, so.
So the 15 feet, is that from the water's edge or from the wet sand?
We have the emergency one that's from the toe of the dune, 15 foot. But on the fire permits, trying to find it. You have it there, Cliff? In front of you?
On South Walton Fire District, as Victor, AUGHAN. The 15-foot corridor is from the edge of the dune. That's for the emergency vehicle access.
Okay.
Has a 15-foot from the water's edge, and that was in dual system. Set up some separate public issues, so essentially you could have a 30-foot beach with a 15-foot and a 15-foot, and it's the same issue that we were just speaking about.
But as pertains to the bonfires, that's 15 feet from the vegetation line.
50 feet, yes, sir.
50 feet.
To include that 15-foot from the vegetation line.
Or can't be within 100 feet of a habitable structure.
So that's kind of to my question, is the 15 feet in addition to the 50, or is that included in the 50?
I think it's included in the 50, yes, sir.
Should be included, yes.
Yeah, again, we will certainly look at all that in the new year. That's typically when we go out there and review all the accesses, and we plan to meet with code enforcement and really, more than one set of eyes is always good to look at these accesses and make sure that, it's still doable. And again, if we don't feel that it warrants having a bonfire or hosting one safely, then we'll take it off our list. We have an online system now, so when you go in there and if you want to have a bonfire at Wall Street, and that access is only limited to 2. Once those 2 has been taken up, you can't get another bonfire on there. So it is literally that simple, going in there and changing those numbers.
Awesome.
And we appreciate the county's putting us in charge of that and giving us the opportunity to run it. In the 10 years that we've done it, we feel like we've done a good job in monitoring the program, and really more than anything is just ensuring the safety of the community, and also trying to do our best to protect the beaches at the same time. It is an added value for people to come down here.
And just so everybody knows too, when you read the ordinance on fires, it describes a bonfire, a campfire, or other activity which results in an open flame. So that can include tiki torches and all that. They need to be 50 foot from the toe of the dune. Yes, sir. That's an open flame. All right. Did you have something on?
Yes, I would. I've had the benefit in my life of living and traveling a lot of different places, one of which was Southern California before they just lost their minds. But some of the things I saw in some of the communities, I think may work well for us. And in the coastal communities out there, one of the things that they did with bonfires is they have the big concrete cauldrons. And so, they've got an alphanumeric stencil on it to where if you want to have a bonfire, you tell them whether it's Huntington Beach or Laguna, wherever the case may be, and you have an assigned cauldron. So that way you can regulate the number and placement of those bonfires. Another cool little thing that they do, some of the areas, is they'll have their area, elementary schools and middle schools have competitions for artwork. And it's generally something with marine life and sea life. And so if a school wins that particular cauldron, then their students get to paint it that year with the starfish and the things that, the school has done, which gives everybody kind of a sense of community pride. And everybody likes to come out and say, hey, my kid painted this. So if that's something, that you all think would be viable as well, it's easier to regulate. Literally, the fire department would have a list of those locations, and once they run out, they run out. But you know exactly where they're going to be. And for cleanup, because one of the things I hate as a beach goer is to come out first thing in the morning to go paddle boarding, and I'm walking around all sorts of embers and charred wood. With the cauldrons, it'd be much easier for beach code to come by because they know exactly where they are. Check to make sure that they've been cleaned out, and if they haven't been cleaned out, then that person loses their deposit and possibly gets a fine. Other communities have used things like that. It's much easier to regulate, and your community actually gets to take part in putting a little bit of artwork out there. So, my 2 cents.
All right. Yes, sir.
It is a structure that nobody's going to walk off with. They're, I guess, the equivalent to Public Works or their beach maintenance. They have little eyelets or that they can pick up like on a forklift or something. Look down the public beaches, they may be 50 yards apart, and they're always back. They're not anywhere where most people. They're also far away from any type of vegetation.
Yeah, there's not 50, you get 50 foot.
And around all that, I'm for it.
Yeah, and that's California. I mean, some of their beaches, Huntington Beach, might be 200 or 300 yards wide in certain sections. So, but it's just an option.
All right, so that was bonfires. Let's see, what else can we talk about? Anybody? Nope. Anybody got anything else? Bonfires, we talked about that. We talked about, we did talk about ghost chairs. We talked about the permits. I can't think of anything else. Let me ask this, with the vendors that's in here, I think we got 1, 2, 3, 4. What do y'all feel about the new type of box if we went to something like this? 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%, done. No, I'm just kidding. It ain't. Yeah, well, and of course, that would be a criminal act if they did that, so, he's gonna say something.
I'll just say something about it. Dave Meadows, La Dolce Vita. That cover has been like a brain thing in my brain for the past 3 years, and because I hate the beach boxes. I had 2 hernias just because I tried to lift a box and put it in the back of my truck, and I'm tired of fixing them and then washing away or whatever the case may be. So I went to a website and I found just a customized cover. And that's the thing, if the county does entertain this and does want to adopt it into the ordinance as an option, And I think it should be an option. I think, you know, if it works and people are happy with it and the county feels that that's environmental great for us, then make it across the board. Boxes still need to be used in certain things, depending on, you know, how you design these covers. You don't want to go to Walmart and buy the gray tarp or the blue tarp and strap it over the beach chairs, because then you're going to lose the identity of the beach. You know, things start to change out there. So be very specific in when you're going through this, and be glad to give you guidelines for it on there. But, you know, uniformity across the beach will go a long way. Less complaints calling, I got this ugly blue thing, or flapping in the wind, or something like that. But they're, you know, they're custom made, and the one I've designed that we currently use, and there's probably about 24 of them out on the beach since the last storm that came through, because we did lose boxes. I've designed them to where they hold about 16 sets. And the reason why a beach box is 4x8, which I was telling Tony yesterday, because that's the way the material is basically sold. Vendors would make a larger box to accommodate certain chairs, a certain weight, a design. That cover, to be perfect, needs to be about 4 inches wider, to where it'll allow 2 rows of chairs coming out from a designated spot against the dune line. And then it gives you a good platform to put the umbrellas on top. And then it has grommets along the bottom to where you secure it and lock it, so it's not flying or going anywhere, or people can pull it off and take it away. It can be improved by several things, but it's a work in progress. But I would just keep it specific and not, you know, say, hey, you can put a beach cover on there.
Agreed.
Because it'll get out of hand.
Well, I think we would still need to put the permit numbers on it.
Absolutely. And just the way I do it, it's a double-sided tape with the permit number on it. It stays on there through the whole season. We pop it off if we have to use it somewhere else, and so forth. But, you know, Tony said, hey, your bag did really good or Danny said, your bag did really good during the storm. And I said, well, Danny, it wasn't out there during the storm. That's the beauty of the bag. You know, it comes off. And beach boxes will cause erosion, you know, left out there over a period of time. I'm sure there's been plenty of complaints, or you guys have all seen it, during the off-season when we're not out there doing chairs and umbrella, boxes are now like this, or completely flipped upside down. It's just because the wind erodes the sand underneath, creates big holes, and they're teeter-totter and this and that, to where, you know, the equipment is off the beach, the bag is off the beach, there's not a footprint left on the beach. And during the season, when that erosion occurs, you catch it early now, and now you can just move it over to the next spot so you don't cause any major problems out there. But thanks, and I hope they consider that.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Lisa? Tell them your name.
Lisa Bauschy, B-O-U-S-H-Y. On the lady that called in, you know, that was concerned about the boxes, I would think that homeowners that feel they need to put things on the beach or leave things on the beach would be happy to have something lesser to deal with too. I happen to be a fan of remove everything from the beach, but, you know, I realize there's just things that realistically people really can't. And I just want to add a little bit on the bonfire issue. I should have come up when you asked that. I was not aware that bonfires were allowed in front of houses. So I mean, I live on a beach and with a house, and we don't have bonfires on our beach area, but unless the homeowner themselves, the owner, agrees to it. So obviously, if they have a bonfire and the smoke comes up and gets them inundated with smoke, that's kind of their problem. But I thought bonfires were only allowed at like in areas like regional accesses where there were not really upland homes. So I learned something new today. Right. Correct, right, yeah. But so there actually are fairly substantial sections of beach.
How many bonfires on an average per night do you think you hit, Cliff?
On Friday and Saturday nights, we have anywhere from 45 to 55 fires a night.
And if you only allowed them on regional accesses or areas that did not have an upland home, how many would you think you could have then?
I honestly couldn't tell you, because Sammy and them have set on their permit, and if I'm correct, Sammy, that you only allow so many and it just stops. You can't pull any more for that access, correct? So, but you have to also take into account of private properties. The upland homeowners, they have what they call an annual permit for them, and they call South Walton Fire and they let us know. So it's not just vendor fires, it's not just general public, it's also upland homeowners that are having them as
Right.
well.
And like I said, with the homeowner requirements, I don't have one, I don't want one, but the homeowner requirements I'm very familiar with because we have had a couple of our beachfront owners who wanted either fires from themselves or their families, or that have allowed inland owners that are part of our neighborhood to have one on their property. So I know the rules are, good and stringent and tight on that. And like I said, in those cases, the owners agreed basically to have smoke potentially come and inundate their deck or their home or whatever. But I just was surprised to learn that if you didn't have that situation, then theoretically a member of the public who you may not know at all could just have a bonfire in front of a home that could then do
Ms.
like Rich
Bauschy,
was suggesting.
and I'm not sure, but I think Mr. Jaffe was referring to public beach accesses where I guess private property would be abutting the access, and it's those owners that are close to the access that would be impacted. We wouldn't allow a bonfire on private property unless that property owner gave us the permission.
But I wonder
gave
how
the
many
permitting the
places they're
permission.
allowed where there's an upland owner, even though they may not be the property owner of the beach. I wonder, how much it affects them, how many places there are that they're allowed that it would affect people like that. Because I had never thought about what Mr. Jaffe brought up until now, because I didn't realize that any were issued that would be right in front of somebody's home.
Well, it may not be
anyway.
in front of the home. It could be down the beach and the wind's blowing. and-
Well, that's true
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
but I mean,
And I think
otherwise you
that's what
just
she
have
was
to say
talking-
you can't have any of them.
Yeah. All right, thank you. We do have one, Ms. Yurko.
Yes. I'm commenting on the canvas covers for the chairs. One, to give you 2 points to think about. One are photo shoots at the end of every day. I know, like on our beach alone, just looking out at it in the afternoon off the deck, it is usually filled with the public taking photographs. And if you have those chairs in place with the canvas covers on it, it's not going to quite give the same look to our beach that we've enjoyed once all the chairs are taken down. And second, I wanted you to be aware that we suffer a lot of vandalism on our beach. We're adjacent to Van Ness Butler Park, and we're kind of wedged between Seaside and Watercolor. And it seems like the Seaside people tend to push the young people off of their beach, and then the Watercolor people tend to push them off of their beach, and we're kind of stuck next to the public beach. And nobody really checks on it because it's kind of a small public access point. And over the past few summers, we've just had mobs of kids that have like destroyed the lifeguard chairs, dragged them onto our beach, set our dunes on fire with fireworks. And I just wanted you to be aware, by doing a canvas cover like that, you're kind of inviting even more vandalism in that area of the beach.
Okay, thank you. Just make sure if you have vandalism, you call the sheriff's office. They would
We
be
do
glad
all
to
the
handle that.
time, and we hardly ever get anyone to respond. I'll just be frank. I mean, honestly.
They have
we
assured
every
me they're going to
time-
respond.
Every time that lifeguard chair gets dragged off from the public beach and gets thrown onto our beach, we will call and call all night long and nobody shows up.
Okay, well, I think they'll try to respond. So if something happens, give them a call at the sheriff's office and they'll be glad to respond.
Yes,
And
we do every time and document it just in case, but
Okay.
I'm just giving, like, we've actually had to put out our own fires.
Yeah, what do you mean by you had to put out your own fire? Not of your house, right?
No, it was at the dunes. If we hadn't put it out, it would have probably caught the houses on fire.
Oh, okay.
But our dunes that we're all trying to preserve and care, because we actually have a landscaper that comes down and restores our dunes every year and tries to keep them healthy.
Yeah.
With the permit, obviously.
Sure.
But, yeah, when the kids set off the fireworks and they happen to accidentally go into the dunes, they go up like tinder. And we've had that happen a couple times where we've had to race down to the beach and put it out ourselves.
And that's a very good reason why we need to be 50 foot from the toe of the dune with the open flames.
Yeah, except that wasn't permitted.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Enough on fires. Anything else? Any other topics? Has anybody up here got a topic we need to talk about, discuss? This is the last day of this.
We hadn't said anything about.
Yeah, we have signage on the beach, whether it be private property signage, whether it be, everyone knows there's colors and certain colors you can use and all that. We do find them sometimes down there that are not within the guidelines that we have to ask them to correct it. Most of the time they do. So just if you do a sign, just keep in mind what the ordinance says about the colors and all that stuff. We want it looking beautiful. Anything else? Anybody's got anything else? So anybody out here got anything else? Going once? Going twice? We're sold. It's over. Thank you.